Welcome to Lean to the Left, home of no-holds-barred commentary, plus interviews with fascinating people, some of them top experts, others simply with interesting stories to tell. You'll never know who'll show up at Lean to the Left. Now here's your host, Bob Gaddy.
Hey guys, welcome to the Lean to the Left podcast. Today we're with John Spencer. He's chair of urban warfare with the Madison Policy Forum and author of the new book, Connected Soldiers, Life, Leadership, and Social Connections in Modern War. It'll be available July 1. He has a second book coming out in September. It's called Understanding Urban Warfare. And I think we're probably going to talk a lot about urban warfare today. Spencer is an internationally recognized expert and advisor on urban warfare and other military-related topics. He served over 25 years in the active army, including 2 combat deployments to Iraq as both an infantry platoon leader and company commander. He's a frequent military analyst and commentator for CNN, MSNBC, BBC, and other media organizations. He just recently returned from Ukraine, and we'll talk with him about that. John, welcome to the program. It's really an honor to have you with us today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. It's an honor for me to be here.
What were you doing over there? I know that much of the war that's being fought is in urban areas in Ukraine, and I'm just wondering, with your expertise in urban warfare, if that was a reason why you were there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the chair of urban warfare studies, so I study urban warfare, and I've been doing that for about a decade. So I went into Ukraine specifically to study and understand the Battle of Kiev, which is probably one of the most important urban battles of the modern era. It was a strategic battle, as in the Russians just needed to get inside of Kiev and take the Capitol building. They didn't need to clear it, but they needed to overthrow the government and raise the Russian flag. So I went in and extensively studied battle positions and all that. And I've learned in my time as studying urban warfare for the last 10 years, you can study it a lot, but you got to walk the ground. You got to talk to the people that fought there to really get a firm understanding of what happened so that I can write a report of the battle and share the lessons with all armies, really.
Mm-hmm. Is your work being used in any way by the Ukrainian people, by the Ukrainian Army?
Sure. So I wrote as soon as the war kicked off, I saw what was happening, and I wrote some tweets that turned into a book saying, hey, I'm an old infantryman who studied urban warfare for a little bit. Here's the things that I would do. And that recommendations or those comments became a book called The Mini Manual for the Urban Defender, which I wrote for Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they've been using it since the very beginning. They're still publishing it off and sending it to the east of Ukraine. It was, I know the manual was in Mariupol and Azovstal. So yeah, absolutely. They're using some of my very simple, basic guidance on urban warfare. And as they are transitioning day to day from some places they're defending and some other places they're attacking.
Wow. I read some of your mini manual. It's really, I mean, it's very down to earth. It just says, this is what you do. I mean, like 12 steps to knocking off the enemy in an urban setting.
Yeah, I think I'm an old, I started off as a private in the military, so I understand basic military instruction. I was also an instructor for Ranger School a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I understand that people under stress need very clear, and as you've seen in the manual, some of it's like literally stick figure diagrams saying, do this, not that.
Yeah. Oh, man. So now on CNN, you said that the use of many layers of barriers being used by the Ukrainian forces in their cities can, quote, hold off the best army in the world, and Russia's not the best. Explain what you were talking about.
Sure. So understanding what the objective of the army was, you always have to study battles and wars based on the political objectives of the militaries. understanding that Russia's number one political objective was to get inside of Kiev.
Yeah.
So your number one objective to defeat that is to prevent them from getting inside Kiev.
Right.
So I talked about using all the natural aspects of the urban terrain to set up just layers and layers of obstacles that they can't get through. Now that I've been there, I understand, one, they use my advice, right? So in the very beginning, there's pictures of them just laying in the streets waiting for Russians to come. And I said, well, don't do that. You know, park a bus in the road, park a dump truck in the road, because there's even a tank is not going to get through a dump truck that's parked in the middle of the road. And they did that. They responded to that, and you started to see buses and cars and trucks. But there's things going on that we all didn't see too, right? So they blew their bridges, and not just a few bridges. They blew all the bridges, except for a few that they're using. Again, forcing the Russians to come in these very small roads. They even flooded not just one river, 3 different rivers leading into Kiev. One of them flooded an entire town, all for the purpose of preventing the Russians from using anything other than a few main roads, which militaries don't like to do. If you can force a military down one road, you can create, which they did, just immense killing zones where you're just picking off hundreds of vehicles because they're ducks in a row into your kill zone.
Did you see any of the fighting when you were over there?
No. So I stayed in Kiev, although I got a little closer to Chernobyl than I wanted to. And I got farther east, but I had some direct instructions from my wife on where I could and couldn't go. But I was also there to study a very specific battle. And although I may have talked to people about what's the fighting that's going on in the east, right? So that as we speak, there's major pitched battles, like the Battle of Severodonetsk, which is a major city of 100,000 people. I saw nobody fighting, but I saw a lot of people in Kiev getting ready to fight. So they knew they won the battle, but they're preparing every day if the Russians come back.
You told Velshi, Ali Velshi on CNN, that the will to fight is everything. Is that something you talk about in your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something I try to, the book's a memoir, but I also put in the research. I used to teach at West Point. I know there's research on why soldiers fight. Even Napoleon has some famous quotes, and all the great captains, Washington and, all these people have known for really centuries that the truest thing in battle is the soldier's will to fight. Sometimes people in the news were saying that's morale, although morale's a little bit separate than the will to fight. It all adds up to the will to fight. And that's why my book is a lot about cohesion. But the Ukrainians from day one had what the Russians didn't, which is an unfaltering will to fight. And that's what I observed while I was visiting. To my surprise, really, how many civilians just took up arms because they wanted to protect their land. So militaries, like Napoleon said, that the moral is to the physical 3-to-1. So it's 3 times more important than the physical aspects of fighting. You got to have the courage. You got to have the will why you are fighting. Usually the answer to that question across time, many militaries have been studied, whether it's Americans, Germans, Iraqi, the soldiers, when asked, why are you fighting? Why are you ready to die? And it's always for the person to my left or right. It's a complex answer. Of course, it's for your family. Your people in Ukraine are fighting so their families will be safe, so they don't have to live under dictatorship. But that element of fighting for your person to your left and right is a key ingredient to anybody's ability to fight. So absolutely, the will to fight is much more important than numbers on paper or weapons, to be real.
Now, you said that, again, in that interview with Belchi, you said that even a generally unprofessional force like many of the Ukrainian fighters can turn, this is a quote, can turn every street into a meat grinder for Russian troops who are less motivated just by following a few simple steps. What are those steps?
So my instructions back then were the simple steps of preventing yourself from dying. Step one is don't die.
I'd say that's a good step.
Right.
Don't die.
If you're a civilian, you may be standing in a place like this. You're just waiting to die. If you're standing at a checkpoint in the urban area and there are Russians coming your way,
right?
They're going to put artillery or something else in front of them and you're just going to die. So step one is don't die by being able to survive aerial bombardments, and things like that are going to come when any military moves into urban terrain or any environment. So that was step one. Step two is to block all the roads you don't want your enemy to go down. And this is what the Ukrainians did, right? They blew the bridges, they flooded the streets, they made it so the attacker could only come down the streets they wanted them to come down. And then you wait for them, and you wait for them in the buildings and just let them fall into this trap, shoot the first vehicle. And like we saw in Bucha on day 2, and you can kill hundreds of vehicles because they can't go anywhere. And they're literally, you've turned your streets into this meat grinder that they'll keep feeding troops into. Now, of course, if you have artillery, it makes it a lot easier to do all this. But if you follow these basic steps in understanding what the military wants to do and take that away from him, no army is, even the great, the best military in the world, the American military, will avoid urban combat if they can for all these logical reasons. So if you force a military to fight in urban terrain, you already are winning.
What's your impression of the Russian military?
So I think all of us in this community of militaries thought the big bear was a giant, right? One of the best militaries in the world. And now they've already lost, is what I said. I've said in the news many times, no matter what happens in Ukraine, although I'm rooting for the Ukrainians, Russia's lost so much because no longer can it give an image that they're this big, powerful military. They may be large in numbers, but how many incompetent things they've done to their plan of attack for trying to take Kiev, to their lack of training, to this reliance on the conscript, not having non-commissioned officers. There's just so many levels where they may have gone into the world at like number 2 or 3 in the world for militaries. They're going to come out of this war at like number 147, like next to like some random island country. That's how bad their military has performed.
Holy mackerel. That's got to be driving Putin crazy.
Yeah. I mean, they have nuclear weapons, so they have that going for them, but they do not have military power.
Wow. Now, all right, so you told Velchi it's going to be really bad for Russia. It's going to be a bloodbath. So I guess you still believe that, right? I mean, based on what you just said.
Yeah, and it has been, right? So the numbers, depending on what number you believe, Russia's never going to tell you those numbers. They've lost tens of thousands of soldiers. Maybe you can argue they don't care because of where they get their soldiers from. They don't really get them from, Moscow and St. Petersburg. They take them from the hinterlands. So there is this aspect that they don't care how many soldiers they lose. So bloodbath or not, they're going to keep moving forward. But I absolutely, even with some losing ground here or there, I think the Russians are paying an inordinate price for their objectives. Now they have a much smaller objective, but it's still a bloodbath for them. And now there's 50 countries, and I'm sure by the time we talk again, there'll be more than 50 countries. But there are 50 countries aligned with Ukraine, providing them support to kill Russians.
Yeah. So, have you seen evidence that Russian soldiers are basically turning tail and trying to get the hell out of there?
Absolutely. We've seen Russian soldiers abandoned. There have been more Russian tanks that have been left with the keys on and running than there have been that have been destroyed. They're abandoning their equipment and running like cowards. They're driving over their own commanders with their own tanks.
Oh man!
They're refusing to fight. There's been entire formations that says, "I will not fight." they're shooting themselves in the foot, slicing their own tires, puncturing their own gas tanks. There's strong evidence of all this happening. A lot of the Russians didn't even know where they were going. They thought they were going on a training event. And then they find out they're in Ukraine. All of this has been captured through cell phone intercepts. And of course, there's a bandwidth, right? There's this band of the highly indoctrinated and almost like Nazi level fighters that the Russians have that will suffer greatly for Mother Russia. Then you have these conscripts that didn't want to be there in the first place, but there's this wide bandwidth but absolutely there's been so many daily evidence of Russians refusing to fight or doing crazy things and it's normal, right? In the history of war, what happens when soldiers lose the will to fight? They don't believe in why they're fighting. They don't believe in their officers. Really bad things start to happen. And we've seen that.
You said that they're pulling their conscripts from the hinterlands. What are you talking about? Are you talking about young men who live in rural areas who probably aren't very well educated and so on and so forth, or what?
Correct. Yeah, they don't do their military recruitment in the big cities because politically their strength is the big cities, so that would just increase political instability. So most of the mandatory service, right? So conscript is not a bad thing, but this mandatory service element comes from all areas outside of those main urban areas. So they come from the rural lands as far east as Siberia, really.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Connected Soldiers, your new book. General David Petraeus, a former commander of the surge in Iraq and U.S. Central Command and Coalition forces in Afghanistan, said this about it. Connected Soldiers provides a wonderfully stimulating, thoughtful, and thought-provoking examination of how the increase in connectivity between those on the front lines and those on the home front affects the all-important bonds between our soldiers carrying out tough missions overseas. Explain that. What's he talking about?
Sure. So the whole theme of the book is that I compare my 2003 deployment when we had no connectivity to the outside world, really what I thought war would be based on watching movies and everything, the band of brothers and sitting around a campfire and talking to each other, coming back after big missions and just talking to each other. Really what the research shows is that those bonds where soldiers are willing to die for each other, they're formed in two ways. One, shared experiences, right? So we all suffer through combat together. It bonds us as brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. But number two is really the research says that you actually become friends with them by just spending mindless hours together, which is really what war was, which is just, immense amounts of boredom punctuated with extreme fear and violence. Mm-hmm. You spend time together, you become friends, you learn about the other person, his loves, his likes, everything. Well, I compared that to my 2008 deployment where, of course it was a different type of war and a different type of army, but the world has changed. So we could FaceTime with our families. We could call every day, call home. Mm-hmm. So ideally that means you're just spending less time talking to your soldiers. So in the book, I try to pick that apart from every angle of what we call this band of brothers, this cohesion that, well, if I come back from an operation and I don't talk to the people I just did that operation with, even if it was a horrible event. And the one example I use in my book is we were out on patrol and the enemy missed us and killed an Iraqi kid. I mean, we're all human and that impacted all of us. And when we got back to the base, I went to look for the soldiers who were involved in that operation. They were all on the phones talking back home. Right. So I thought I felt something was off. And that's when my wife deployed in 2018 and I was out of the military, I was really the family at home. Right. Where now I could FaceTime with my wife while she's deployed to war and my 3 little kids every night that she was available. So what it's done is it's blurred the lines that have always been there in time between the soldier and his families, which are important to him, right? So he has this kind of wartime family and he has his parents, his wife, his husband, you name it. If I can blur those lines, now the soldier's living 2 lives. He's living his wartime life and he's living in life back home because he's hearing about all the ups and downs of what's going on back home. And oh, by the way, war is made up of three populations. It's the military, the politicians, and the populations that sent them to war. So now if us back home, we have a window into war that we've never had in history, clearly it's going to change war, change the soldiers' experience, who now is living in two worlds, change the family's experience because they're seeing war daily as well, and hearing about war unlike they've never had before. When we used, George Washington would write letters home to Martha, or we all used to write letters home. I think it has, in my book, I argue that it has implications for combat power, effectiveness. So the soldier's ability to fight, if he's spending as much time talking to home as he is with his fellow soldiers, it has implications for really how the soldier copes with war. So one of the coping mechanisms that allows soldiers to deal with the horrors of war is each other. They come back from the patrol, they talk through it, they sit on a boat on their ride back from World War II, and they decompress and they cope. This immediate connection between the soldier and back home or wherever, I saw ripples of that, as in it was preventing the soldiers from living with war, not just experiencing the war.
Mm-hmm. So you felt that the internet was really a threat to unit cohesion,
if left unchecked.
If left
absolutely.
Unchecked, yeah. So
that's what I try to talk about. Right, I'm an Army officer, so I tried to bring in leadership theory too. You're not going to change the world. Yeah. And interestingly, I turned my book in right before COVID happened. So this idea that we can all live a virtual life. In war, you need cohesion to survive. Mm-hmm. You need the person to your left and right. Mm-hmm. Some of that's developed. You don't develop that through internet connections. You develop that physically.
I'm sorry.
So leaders have to be able to create the necessary requirements of leading in today's world while people still have these virtual lives and personas.
Well, did the ability of soldiers to connect after a tough day with their family back home, did that help them as much maybe as decompressing with their friends, with their fellow soldiers?
Right. That's one of the paradoxes, right? So absolutely connecting to your families will help, right? It's a part of your social support.
Sure.
Your brothers, your friend, all away from you. Mm-hmm. So there's no turning it off. So absolutely there are positives about staying connected. I miss my children changed without their mother home, and being able to talk to their mom every day, of course, helped them.
Sure.
There are also negatives to it. There's nothing that replaces the physical presence of another human being.
Of course.
Especially if it's your mom, dad, or yours. So again, it can't be left unchecked. So
yeah,
in war, you come back and you would cope together, and then of course you would. But I was seeing what was left unchecked was there was no more coping or talking about what had happened. There was just only talking to your other social support networks.
Well, you were kind of in charge of the unit at that point, right? So did you do something? Did you do anything about that, or what did you do?
Yeah, that's so I did. I actually took an organization that was completely failing on multiple levels, right? Organizations are complex systems of systems.
You're talking about your unit that you were.
Yeah, my unit. Yeah, my unit that I joined in 2008 was the previous chain of command had let it fail on every level, not just on the cohesion level. Wow. So I had to rebuild this organization while in this new world of connectivity.
Yeah.
So I had to make sure the time they weren't connected was being spent most effectively. And I had to prioritize what was most important, like every soldier understand why they were fighting. So I spent a lot of time making sure they understood the mission, why we were in Iraq and why they were going out that day. I had to prioritize things as I rebuilt this organization that had basically been destroyed. It actually got destroyed by an enemy force the night I took it, but I had to rebuild it while leaving them connected. And then dealing with the connection, right? So I was getting messages as a company commander from home saying, this person said he wants to kill all Iraqis on a Facebook page. So that's the new challenges of leading in combat. You have to deal with those aspects of war.
So when you said this person wants to kill all Iraqis, that was one of the men or one of the soldiers, right?
One of my soldiers, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Wow. So I'm just wondering, I know you I guess you consult on leadership issues and that kind of thing, right?
I do sometimes. My primary day job is urban warfare, but you're not going to do any type of warfare without leaders and what it takes to do that.
I'm just wondering if these same issues, though, of trying to cope together, deal with if they apply to non-military families in their daily lives. You think about the fact that so many families, the mom and the dad, both are working. Sometimes they're working conflicting shifts, where some work in the morning and come home, and then the other one leaves and goes to work, and they hardly ever spend any time with each other. Does what you're talking about apply to these folks in any way?
I absolutely think so, and I apply it to my daily life now that I'm not in the military anymore, right?
Yeah.
We are more connected, everybody, than we've ever been in history, but in some aspects, you're also more alone, as we think that these virtual environments can replace certain things. So as a leader of my family, me and my wife together as a team, we do create moments that bond us as a family. Like a family, military, as I'm talking about the military, but they're families just as much as they're organizations that you go to work.
Sure.
So creating moments like eating together, like we eat together, which is ancient in the military, that eating together is a bonding experience.
Sure.
It's a tech-free, so we make sure even in our daily, like you said, in the limited family time we have together, since we both work, that we take advantage of moments. So every dinner possible, we have dinner together almost every day. Sometimes it's not possible, but it's tech-free. It's talking to each other as much as anytime we have on weekends or something, we get out into nature. So these aspects that are in my book are really about humans and forming humans into groups, which is how we survived from the birth of humans, and not forgetting that we do need each other. So if you're leading a business organization, there is this aspect of ensuring that your team understands that they are a group, and that's why being in the military helps you understand it, right? War is not an individual act; it's a group act.
Right.
So you find out that you need the person to be able to achieve your mission. So there's actually task cohesion or social cohesion. Some people say task cohesion is more important, whether that's in sports, understanding what their goal is. In the military, when you're asking somebody to die for each other, I think social cohesion is more important. Loving each other, understanding that you are a family. So yes, it translates into daily families, daily businesses that they have to understand, and they have to deliberately, now that we're more connected, create bonding experiences while you also as leaders are reiterating why we're doing whatever it is. So we talk about, why it's important for values and virtues. And as you're trying to build small kids up into good humans, organizations, and this is nothing new, right? Leadership theory is about creating a mission, getting shared belief in the mission that we have to do. We're only going to achieve that as a group. The problem is if this connectivity, these virtual worlds and virtual personas go unchecked in whatever setting, and it even applies to sports, right? So the NBA had a big problem with people in the locker room while the coach trying to create motivation during the halftime. Right. Players are on their phones, not looking up.
Yeah.
So you have to be cognizant of this to create these moments that do translate to performance.
Yeah. Yeah, I've often thought that when I'm a big baseball fan. I watch a lot of baseball games. So the pitcher gets blown out, and they take him out. And he, in a huff, he puts on his jacket and heads down the runway to the locker room. No staying around to see how his buddies are doing, none of that. It seems to me that that's just the opposite of what should be going on, in especially when you're making the money they're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some real famous movies that we love, like the hockey movie of the American hockey team, and he just drills them on the ice until they understand that it's we, not I.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but so these are not new lessons, right? We've known these across time.
Of course.
But social media is not a threat. It can have very negatives, right? I have so many veteran friends who go into these social media worlds and they feel like they're alone, right? Because they get to watch everybody else's family growing up and don't want to bother them. And they go down this long path of they're just alone and there's no future for them. And that's a really dark aspect of social media, or even though self-radicalization, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to over extrapolate, like mass shootings and things are usually people who have gone down a very dark social media enabled path of there's nothing left for them in life.
Mm-hmm.
We are human social beings. We need community. We need belonging, and we need purpose.
All right. That's a good way to close it. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, Bob, thanks a lot. It's been an honor to speak with you. Really, I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much. It was an honor for me. I come from a military family myself, and my father served in 3 wars.
Wow.
So, appreciate
Thank you for your service. Yeah, thank you. And for your service. I know the military family serves with their parents.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. All right, John. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Hey, guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this Lean to the Left video, and that you'll come back on a regular basis and check out our interviews with guests on topics that I hope you find interesting, entertaining, and enlightening. Our audio interviews stream weekly on Mondays, and depending on what's going on, also on Thursdays. And many are also produced as videos like this one. In addition, we provide narrations of much of the commentary published on the Lean to the Left blog, commentary by some excellent writers with perspectives on a whole range of topics. Now, you can sign up as a member at leantotheleft.net. And of course, it's all free. Also, let your friends know about this podcast and take a minute to subscribe. Just go to podcast.leantotheleft.net. You can subscribe there. You can also check out the upcoming interview schedule, and you can listen to all of our episodes too. You can also support this podcast by clicking on the Donate tab at the top of the page, where you'll find links to buy me a cup of coffee and also PayPal. Follow us on social media. Facebook at the Lean to the Left Podcast, Twitter at Lean to the Left 1, Instagram at Not Fake News. Now remember, our goal is to be informative and entertaining as we comment on the latest developments in the news. You guessed it, with just a little lean to the left. Now this is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left.